Hey there, data lovers. It's Jeff here at IDEC, and I love Data Fridays. And I just want you to know that here at ILDF, we need your help. We have had some fantastic episodes of I Love Data Fridays recently, and especially in our How Do You Do Data series. You'll remember our episode with Jeff Williams back in November, our next episode of How Do You Do Data with Beth Moxie and Amy Emmons in December, and then we had our episode with Amy Smith and Leslie McBain in January. And then last month we did sort of a revisit back to Jeff Williams' episode, but instead of doing the slides in PowerPoint, we did them in Google Slides. Now, it's kind of hard for me to keep coming up with all of these episode ideas, and I want to know how you do data. So if you've got an idea for I Love Data Fridays, I would love to hear from you. And you can send your suggestions to brymerj at idecweb.us. That's BRYMERJ at idecweb.us. One more time, BRYMERJ at idecweb.us. And thank you very much. Now on with the show. All right there. Hey, data lovers, and welcome to another episode of I Love Data Fridays here at the International Data Evaluation Center on the campuses of the Ohio State University. And ladies and gentlemen, so good to have you back for another episode 45 of I Love Data Fridays. And today we've got another installment of How Do You Do Data? But before we get into that, hey, who's talking data to you today? Well, of course, you've got me, Jeff Brymer-Bashore, Director and Co-Principal Investigator here at the International Data Evaluation Center. And today, on this episode, I will be joined by Laurel Dickey, Reading Recovery Teacher Leader from the Collaborative for Educational Services in Western Massachusetts. And as in what it said back here in the title screen, we are going to be discussing how to troubleshoot your data today. And Laurel is going to be helping us do the troubleshooting. So now, we've got a couple goals or missions. Our missions today, we got a couple of missions here. Well, first, I'm going to introduce you to some new tables that will be available in your 2019-20 site and district reports. We're going to use these new tables today so you can get introduced to them and see how they work. And then we're going to demonstrate how we use these tables to take the temperature of the data in your site or district. So we won't use these new tables to kind of dig deeper into student data, but it will allow us to look for sort of these big systemic issues if they exist in your site. Then we're going to take a second report and we're going to show how we can use these new set of tables and the second report. Specifically, we're going to be using the student data summary, and we're going to see how these two reports can work together to troubleshoot through your data. So as we go along, you're going to hear Laurel sort of throw out these questions in the air as she sees things in the data that catch her attention. So whenever we come up to a question, you'll hear this sound. And I'm going to keep track of all the questions that she asks, and at the end of the episode, we will compile these questions all together, and we'll make them for available download after the episode. So I will show you where you can find these questions at the end of the episode. Also, this is our required training, or our required training for the Digging into Data session at the Teacher Leader Institute. So teacher leaders, if you're coming to the Teacher Leader Institute this year, this is your required training for the Digging into Data session. We're going to be using the same exact reports there, so if you sit through this video and try it out, you're going to be in great shape for that Digging into Data session at the Teacher Leader Institute. Now, also, as of the recording of this podcast, IDEC has rerun all of your 17-18 and 18-19 site and district reports to include the new tables that we're discussing back up in our mission number 1. And we've done this for both reading recovery and DLL reports. So you can stop the video right now, download your site report or district reports from 18-19 and 17-18 and follow along using your data and kind of follow along with Laurel and I in this episode. So before we get into it, digging into our data here, I think it's important to sort of tell everyone about one concept about your reports. So IDEC reports are like onions, all right? They come in layers. Our reports have layers. So many of you know that we have site level reports, district level reports, school level reports, and teacher level reports. So these represent the different layers of our reporting onion, okay? So now, these different reports can serve different functions. So for example, our reports that are higher up in our layers can actually help us highlight systemic issues in our sites. So not issues that involve individual students, but if we have it happening to many schools or many students, these become systemic issues, and these reports can help highlight these systemic issues. And this is what the first set of tables that Laurel and I are going to look at can help highlight. Then we have reports that can help us locate student level problems. So down at our school level reports and our teacher level reports, we can start locating problems at the individual student level. So now, armed with this new knowledge of locating student level problems, we can plan out individual changes to lessons. With the other reports, we can start identifying and thinking about ways to address systemic issues. And if we can put all of that together, we can start to see a change in our overall results. So now, as you listen to Laurel and I go through the data, and as you think about your data for the Digging Into session at Teacher Leader Institute, I want you to start thinking about goals that you can ask yourself. But I want you to avoid making a goal that talks about increasing your discontinuing rate. I don't think those are very effective goals to have. What Laurel and I are going to show today, addressing these individual changes to lessons and systemic issues, if we can fix these systemic issues and change the quality of lessons, then the discontinuing rate will follow, meaning it will increase. If we can fix these problems, then our discontinue rate's going to follow along with the fixing of those problems and go up. So as you think about this today, don't think about, oh boy, I'm going to think about increasing my discontinue rate. Think about fixing these systemic issues and these individual problems with student lessons. All right, let's get into it and let's talk a little data. I love Data Friday! All right, Laurel, we are recording now. Why don't you go ahead, introduce yourself, how many years you've been in reading recovery and education?
Good morning, Jeff. I guess I've been teaching now for over 30 years, and I've been a teacher leader for over 25 years. And I work in Western Massachusetts at the Collaborative for Educational Services. And we support reading recovery teachers in the western part of Massachusetts. And I work with my colleague, Lynn Santa, down in Springfield, Massachusetts, which is the site nearby to us in an urban district.
Laurel, thanks for agreeing to join me on another I Love Data Fridays. You always seem to be extra excited to come and talk data with me, so I appreciate that very much.
But you're especially fun.
Good answer. I love that. All right. All right. So, folks, you've probably heard me hopefully describe in the opening that Laurel and I today are going to look at two different reports today. And actually, we're going to be looking at a set of tables, and it's the tables that are on the right side of my screen that are going to be new in your site reports this year. And these tables, I've designed them to, as I was telling Laurel when we were describing this episode, that to help take the temperature of your site. So the data, some of the data, well, all of the data that we're going to look at can be found in your report in other tables, in multiple tables. But what I've done is, in some cases, tried to take data from multiple tables, put them in a single table, and then we'll have some instances also where we'll be able to compare your data right next to national data. So the national data will be put together right next to your data in the table. And the hope is that these data will then help you all of a sudden start to raise questions about your data, and then allow you to then use the other report, which will be our student data summary, to go and hunt for the data that we have questions about. Now, as I know, also Laurel's, we've sent Laurel this data ahead of time. She has promised me that she has not opened it until the day of this recording and everything. So Hopefully these data are still brand new to your eyes, right, Laurel?
It's absolutely true. I'm going back to the email. So here we are. I still haven't opened it. I will not click open until you tell me to do so.
Well, why don't you go ahead and get it open while I finish off just the quick introduction here about what we're going to do. So Laurel and I are going to go through the tables. I'm going to sort of describe the tables, but I'm going to let Laurel drive the data conversation as we go through the data. My goal is hopefully as we go along, questions will just pop out of her mouth, and then we'll kind of, in the editing of the video, I'll keep track of the questions that come out, because I think a lot of times when we're looking at data, we don't know what questions to ask. So we're hoping that these charts will drive some questions, and we will be able to then maybe troubleshoot these questions a little further with our data. Fingers crossed. So we're going to
actually, I would preface the conversation by saying I'm really pleased to see how you put the site data next to the national data. That's something I always look at in my site report each year, because I look longitudinally for my site. So what's happening as the years go by? How have we been changing things? And how do we measure up against national data? And nice thing is national data tends to be pretty stable year to year, slowly changing.
All right, so folks, I haven't described what we're looking at here. So on my right-hand side of the screen over here is 4 tables and 1 new chart that we will be exploring today. This first table we're going to look at. All right, Laurel, here. All right, put your data hat on if you don't have it on.
Yep.
All right.
It's always on.
Okay, so first table we're looking at here at the top of my screen, we're just looking at the different end of program statuses. So you'll see 5 rows with each row for the end of program status. The next column just shows the count of students in this site that were in each program status. The percentage that works out to is the next column. And then the final column on the right is the national end of program status percentages.
So right off, the first thing I wonder about, before you even look at the percentages, are this site had 57 kids participating in this year.
Yeah.
And I always wonder about statistical significance. And my understanding is when you're looking at groups of lower than 100, you need to be cautious.
Yeah, we need to be a little cautious about the use of percentages, because they will tend to, a change in one student will make a percentage jump. In this case, with about 57, every student change will almost cause 2%. About 2% change in the...
So one thing it makes me think about is longitudinal data for a site like this would be as important as a single year's worth of data. Like, is this year an aberration, or is this typical over the last 5 years? That's the sort of thing you'd want to know. Well, there you go. Well, and I earlier told you that I really like the Reading Recovery Teacher data comparison sheet, which allows you that 5-year look back. So for the same reason, I think single years can be misleading. Okay, but if we're going to just look at this, then the next thing, I'm so pleased to see that the national numbers are here so that we can compare across. And right off, there's a lot of differences. The recommended, yes, it's higher, but it's, at least it's still in the same percent.
Yeah, in the same ballpark. 20s. Yeah.
But what happens when you look at all the incomplete kids? It's not quite twice as many or twice as high a percentage, but it's very high, 26 compared to 17.
Right.
And by the same token, the discontinued kids having only 35% discontinued compared to the national of 56. What makes me wonder is if you could get more of those incomplete kids to finish, and incomplete kids we know are spring kids, and we know that spring kids are more likely to discontinue than fall kids. So therefore, we could put some percentage of those incomplete kids into the discontinued kids, which would shift both of those percentages in favorable ways. So the other thing I'm looking at is, why is that none of the above numbers so high? Nationally, it's 3%. They've got triple that at 9%. And we know that category should be really small. So those are the kids that I would, both those incomplete kids and those none of the above kids, that's where I would like to go into the student summaries and figure out what's going on with those individual kids.
So our next table is average weeks and lessons per week. So this is data that's actually been gathered from table 2.3, 5.2, no, maybe not 2.3, no, 5.2, S27, and I can't remember off them. Darn it.
Neither can the rest of us, so it's okay.
Darn it,
Don't give us numbers.
I lost my street cred. All right, anyways.
Never.
All right, so what we're looking at going down, if you look down the rows, the data is broken into two sections. We've got first round students and then second round students, and then in each round we're looking at some different end of program statuses. The table is specifically for first round students, only looking at discontinued, recommended, and none of above. Second round students, we use the same groups, and then the incomplete students have also been thrown into this table. The first column, once we get past those end of program statuses, is the data, the actual weeks or average weeks for the site. The next column is the lessons per week for the site. And then it's weeks and lessons per week nationally, so we can compare our data. Right away, I can already see they've got serving kids more than a week and a half longer than, at least for the discontinued kids, than what we've seen nationally.
Yes. Again, the first question I have, though, when I look at all of this, especially lessons per week, where does statistical significance kick in? Is there really a difference between 4.1 and 3.8 lessons per week? I just don't know, but that always feels relevant to me because people will talk about these numbers like they matter, and I never know whether they really do matter.
Yeah. So with such small data, I think here it's not to. So I would not be so concerned about the difference between the 3.8 and 3.9. It's a kind of a trivial. I think it's kind of telling us that, like with the discontinued kids, they're more often than not getting 4 lessons a week with an occasional 3-lesson week in there happening.
Yeah. But is it 3.8 for the that's the discontinued kids? Yeah, the recommended kids get basically the same.
Yeah, the recommended kids are getting basically the same.
And ditto, really, the none of the above kids probably. Like, again, how different are those three numbers, 3.8, 3.9, and 4?
And I find that none of above, actually, I cheated. I looked at this stuff beforehand. I found the none of above. I found that 16 weeks a little bit.
That's what's interesting to me, too.
Yeah, that it's like, honestly, what it smells like to me is like somebody stopped somebody's program after a certain amount of time.
Well, but look at nationally. You've got 13.7.
Yeah.
So what I think is interesting is I think nationally, like overall, everybody is able to say, this kid has been under the table for 3 weeks. I don't think this is appropriate for him. That's a none of the above kid, right? Or after 3 weeks, the kid gets transferred back to kindergarten. Well, he becomes a none of the above kid. 16 weeks says we're teaching kids, and we get close to where end of program happens at a maximum of 20 weeks. And we say, gosh, this isn't going anywhere. And so then we stop their series of lessons.
Yeah.
So the 16 weeks stands out to me, but I'm not quite sure what it means. So again, be interesting to look at who those none of the above kids are, which were only 5 kids, and to see why they were taken out earlier than 16 weeks. What are the individual reasons? And again, 1 year isn't going to tell you it. You're going to have to look longitudinally if you really want to get at what's going on with none of the above.
All right, so I'm going to move on to our chart.
Growth on text level.
Yeah, so I keep forgetting you can't see my screen. I'm like scrolling down. And all right, so folks, on this next one, this is actually sort of a recreation of figure 5.1. We're looking at text level at fall, mid-year, and year-end. And your data, first, we're going to look at first round discontinued and second round discontinued. Your data are the solid lines on this chart. So the solid blue line is the first round discontinued students for the site. The solid red line is the second round discontinued students in the site. And then we have national data just behind it. So the national data are the faint blue lines and the faint red lines on there. And we use the same color scheme. The blue line is the dashed blue line is first round discontinued national, and the dashed red line is second round discontinued national. And then our random sample is the black dashed line with the circles that you see on it. Immediately, I kind of see Laurel. I mean, their students, at least on text level, are coming in lower. So they're slightly harder than...
Everything's lower fall, mid-year, and end of year. They run lower than the national lines.
Yeah. They don't quite get up to the blue line. Their blue line doesn't quite get up. I mean, they get close to the random sample and the national data, but they don't quite get there. And then it opens up slightly by the end of the school year.
And so one thing right off, I think, is my guess is there, if you look at incoming observation survey scores, this site comes in with kids with lower scores.
Yeah.
Than...
To me, we would hope that on the blue line that they would get the kids right up to the sort of that black dot by the middle of the school year. And then that's our hope, is that they keep on track.
So that's interesting. I was looking at this earlier today. I was thinking about stay-nines as opposed to just text level scores. And so I didn't look at mid-year, which is what you're looking at there, but I did look at end of year. Do you know, to be in the average band at the end of the year, you can read anywhere from text level 16 to text level 24.
Okay.
Those texts are wildly different. It's just remarkable, and tells you what first grade looks like, because we're talking about our average kids. Average kids are reading anywhere from 14 to 24. When you look at their blue dot there at the middle of the year, and you see that it's lower, and even their blue dot at the end of the year, where you should be seeing the effects of the intervention, you're looking at raw scores, right?
Right.
You're not looking at stay-nines. It would be interesting if you remade that graph with stay-nines. And then I know maybe stay-nines aren't the best way to do it. Maybe percentiles would be a better way to do it. But I just think there is danger to just text level scores.
Yeah. So no, I like this thought though, that in this case, I was starting down the road of criticism, like, oh, this data doesn't look so quote unquote good. But you're reminding me that, and I'm looking at the text level, that's an 18.5 text level. That's well within average.
Yeah, and if you took off the national lines and took off the random sample lines, you wouldn't be worried at all. I wouldn't be worried at all. If I saw that as a school administrator, I'd say, wow, that's great. You're doing great stuff with those kids who started way down there so very low.
Can I point out something else here? The second round students, at least on text level, are coming in slightly lower.
Yeah, that's interesting. Why would that be? Oh, no, why would that be? Why aren't they? Oh, Jeff.
Dun, dun, dun.
What that says to me is they're not taking the lowest kids in the fall.
Maybe, yeah.
You should never see that. So look at the national one. Your first round kids come in at 1.4. Your second round kids come in at 2.3. That's what you expect to see. Yeah. And the random sample would be 5.7. That all makes sense.
Yeah.
Those entry scores don't make sense to me.
Yeah. Okay.
Again, is this some weird thing this year, or is this a trend?
Okay. So the next table, we are just counting. We're showing the count of students by year-end text level. So that's the columns along the top, year-end text level, by different intervention statuses. And we're only looking at 3. So we're looking at discontinued, recommended, and incomplete students. And you can see the various text levels along the top. We stop at we start at 5 or below, and we finish all the way on the right-hand side with 20 and above.
Well, right off, I just think, okay, the discontinued kids are clustering at the top end. The recommended kids are spread throughout. And the incomplete kids look like my data, where you've got a group down at the bottom level, 5 to 8. And then you've got these kids at 12 to 16. And I look at those and I say, why aren't we discontinuing those kids?
Yeah, because we got the 2 at 16 there. I mean,
if you can get to level 12, 14, and 16, and I've had kids as high as 24 in that group, Jeff.
Really?
And so if you can get kids to those levels, why aren't we getting them further to call them discontinued? What is it in the formula that makes people unwilling, unable to designate them as discontinued? And so when I see these kids in my site data in June, I contact teachers on every single one of these kids individually. And I have like 300 kids at my site. So
this site doesn't have it, but sometimes in other examples of this, I've seen on the discontinued road where kids are down in the 8, 7, 6, or even 5 and below.
Yeah, that's worrisome. I was just talking with another teacher leader about that yesterday because let's see how this was. We were talking about mid-year data, and I've got my stay nines here. We're talking about text level. So if you look at the same thing, stay nines 4, 5, and 6 at the middle of the year for text level, you can be as low as a text level 7 at the middle of the year, which, she said, do you ever discontinue kids below a level 10? And I said, it would be highly unlikely. And I went to the section, and I can reference this for you later, Jeff, in the observation survey book, where Clay cautions us that children discontinued below a level 12 are likely to go on having persisting difficulties. So I think we have to it's a tricky thing, because although it falls within the average stay nine band in the middle of the year, these are the kinds of scores you may see at the end of the year that you're talking about, with lower text levels where they don't sustain themselves.
Right.
If they're discontinued at too low a level. They came into reading recovery because they were having a hard time, and they need and deserve opportunities to work at higher, more complex text levels with their reading recovery teacher beside them before they have to go out and do that in a group or an individualized setting.
The other thing that we found a couple times is that it was an indicator of some data entry error.
Yeah, well, yes.
Somebody fat-fingered in something.
Yes, and I always ask those questions as well. If it's a kid designated discontinued and the fall looks odd, you need to ask about that too.
Let's move on to our final table here. And we are just looking at, so this table specifically focuses on recommended students. And we're looking at recommended students at what I'm calling by different text level scenarios. So the first row is counting the number of students who were recommended students that were 5 or below on text level at mid-year, students between 6 and 9 at mid-year. The third row is students between 10 and 12 at mid-year, and then finally we have our row where students who were 9 and below at mid-year but reached 12 by the end of the school year.
So the 5 or below at mid-year, to me, those kids are the kids that Mari talks about, where we've got a second positive outcome and we have clear evidence and lots of information about how they work to go on to some kind of longer term support.
Mm-hmm.
The kids between 6 and 9 at mid-year are more iffy. They may be more of those similar kids at 5 and below, or they may be kids who are in the middle of continuing to pull it together. So those kids between 6 and 9 at mid-year may be the kids who are those 9 or below at mid-year and reach level 12 by year end. So we had 5, and then we had 2 of them who were able to keep on going. The ones that always concern me are the between 10 and 12 at mid-year.
Now, why do they concern you?
Well, it's just like the incomplete kids at 16 at year end or 12 at year end. If a kid in the middle of the year is able to get to 10 or 12, what is it that causes us to say they need to be recommended? If you went into the student data summary sheets and looked for those kids, you could see how do the other scores and balance look.
And then what about the final row there, the 9 or below at mid-year but reached 12 by year end?
Level 12 at year end says they're on their way. They're not non-readers any longer, but they're also not at a point where they're going to be able to independently sustain without some kind of continued support beyond the classroom program. I just want to be sure for those kids in that category that we have a good, strong plan for what happens next.
Let me actually do a quick transition. So now, folks, I'm gonna use the student data summary to try to track down some of the students that Laurel is asking about, or some of the trends that she sees, to see if we can glean some more information from the student data summary. For those of you who haven't used the student data summary before, The student data summary is one of your on-demand reports, and it is just showing some basic summary information about your teachers and your students in your site. So the report is broken down by school district, and each section for a school district starts with this blue, dark blue row up here, and it shows like the total number of students served, the DLL students. There's a whole video on this. I'm not going to go over all this in detail, and I'll put a link at the top of the screen if you want to watch a video about the student data summary. You had wanted, I think, to go hunting at first for some of the none of above students.
Yeah.
The 5 none of above students.
I could look at either incomplete or none of the above kids. Both of those were groups that were interesting.
I was going to start with the none of aboves.
Okay.
And
find them.
They are down. I found 4 of them in school.
4 for one teacher.
Yeah.
4 none of the aboves, 2 incompletes, and 2 discontinued. And those, do we have level? Yeah, none of the aboves. A high number of missed lessons, 10 and above, 10, 17, 14, 16. And all taken out at 18 weeks. And I'm sure it's exactly what I said. They weren't making progress because at 18 weeks, they were at text levels 5, 5, 3, and 2. And so they stopped their programs at 18 weeks.
Can I say that I'm impressed at the number of lessons that they were in general getting, the number of lessons per week. I think this seems like people were really trying to, yeah.
Yes.
And notice that 3 of the kids were highlighted in that misty rose. These would have been.
But I'm also thinking this missed lessons thing is worth talking about because.
Oh yeah.
We talk a lot at our site about what do you do when a kid's attendance is a problem. Reading recovery is a really valuable resource that a school's put into place, and teaching time is really valuable. So the first question is, as soon as a kid starts showing absenteeism, what are we doing? That we need to get somebody to talk to the family, really be clear about the importance of the kid coming to school. We can't keep reading recovery going indefinitely for a kid who doesn't come to school. This is weird too. If you're missing 16 lessons over 18 weeks, how did you get 4.3 lessons per week? Somebody's doubling up, maybe.
Maybe, yeah.
Which again wreaks havoc with other things going on in a school typically. So it's just like, we've got to get kids to school. To me, that missed lessons is about absenteeism, and that's what has to be addressed.
I was gonna move on to that 5th one. It's I think it's on the next.
Teacher 4, yep.
Yeah, teacher 4.
Not many missed lessons for that one. Came out after 8 weeks. Came out at level.
Text level 2.
Yeah. So, that could have been just something was really not going well with that child.
Well, look at the fall total score of 296. That is that's actually really low.
And again, without the notes, we don't know, but
right.
This could be a kid who got transferred to some other kind of special program. This, who knows?
Yeah. No. So, folks, I want you to notice how, Laurel's at a minor disadvantage here. These aren't her data, and so she doesn't have that sort of local knowledge that she would have about the teachers at her school, whereas you would have that more complete story to tell people. All right.
All right, I want to look at the incomplete kids, though, because they're more interesting.
Okay. I'm going to scroll back to the top, and I'm going to do a find. Okay. Well, right away in school number 1, teacher number 1.
Yeah, we got a bunch. 3. But they seem different. So.
Oh, well, those are DLL. The first one at school 1, teacher 1 are DLL kids.
Yeah.
We can talk. Well, they aren't included in the report that we just looked at.
Oh, I see. All right. Well, then let's go to the ones that are included. There's one right there.
In teacher school 2.
Teacher 2. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. They look like a child that wasn't at the school in the fall, maybe. They don't have fall data.
Right. Yeah. And missed 11 lessons, which we were looking before, and it looked like sort of 10 was a break point. So they're just on that cusp of attendance issues. Although there's a discontinued kid up at the top who missed 21 lessons.
Wow.
So I don't understand some of this data, Jeff. So that top kid, discontinued, missed 21 lessons, but had 69 lessons. This incomplete kid we're looking at missed only 11 lessons, but only had 47 lessons. I don't understand.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean,
Something's funky about the data, I think.
yeah. No,
And gosh, I have to say, this is not like when I'm checking those data pages in the spring, there's no way that I'm going to pick up this kind of a discrepancy.
Laurel, you were like reading my mind. So no,
Okay.
so one of the things that I've had other teacher leaders tell me is that this report, as people are entering data, this report fills out. So, for example, when somebody puts in the lessons and the weeks, that all gets filled out in real time on this report. So you can.
So I could print it and look at it.
Yeah, on like I don't know, I was going to say daily, but regular basis, and start looking for anomalies.
Or when you get, depends on how you check data, but look at it before you check the end of year data look at this page before you check your end of year data page for this teacher.
Yes. And a lot of times I've had teacher leaders tell me they use the text level fields just to do a quick spot check of.
I always do that. That's easy to do, but
yeah,
this is harder.
Yeah. So, okay.
But this is interesting. So something's funny there. All right.
Yeah, that is.
Teacher 3, there's an incomplete kid down by the bottom. So you've got the kid at text level 2 after 13 weeks of reading recovery in the spring and designated incomplete, which indeed is how you have to, by the definition, you have to designate that kid incomplete. But that isn't an incomplete kid. That is a recommended kid. Meaning that kid needs further long-term support if after 13 weeks of reading recovery in the spring, they're still reading at text level 2. We don't know what they're reading at. No, wait, we don't have exit. Text level 3.
If they're
text level 3.
But year-end, text level 3, yeah.
Yeah, so it's just a funny thing that we designate that kid incomplete when it's quite clear that's actually a recommended kid.
Right. I think that's being worked on, or it's being looked at, actually.
I love this.
Yeah.
Will I retire before these are all sorted out? Okay.
Things may be different in the fall. I'll just leave that as a teaser.
Ooh, I like teasers.
Yeah.
All right, down to the next teacher 4.
Yeah. She has 4 now she has a recommended in the spring too.
So these are the ones we're really worried about. These are 2 kids who are incomplete and who have text level 14 in the spring.
Yeah.
So I would agree, likely 14 isn't a strong enough place in the spring to call them discontinued, but why weren't we able to do more with them? So first thing to look, number of weeks, 14 weeks in the spring. What is our average number of weeks in the spring, Jeff?
It is, I want to say it's around 13, 14 weeks.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. So it's not number of weeks. They didn't start too late. And their entry text levels were 5 and 2. So the 2, that's a long way to go from 2 to 14.
Wow.
But 5 to 14 isn't so long. It's not. Why couldn't, that's the one I look at. Why couldn't that kid have been discontinued? What happened? .9 lessons per week. That's okay. Only missed 5 lessons. I think these numbers don't tell us why that kid wasn't able to be discontinued.
Right.
What was hard for that kid? I don't know.
So this might be a phone call with a teacher or something. Yeah. Laura, can I throw something in here? So as I'm seeing some missing data on the page, I'm thinking that's why we saw our second round students lower in the fall, because a number of them are missing data. And and in general, we're taking. Yeah, I think the missing data is playing into that. So I don't know if it's a problem.
And the question would be: is it that they didn't assess deeply enough? Or is it a population with high mobility, which might fit with the rest of the profile we saw of the system, which is very low scores coming in? High mobility would contribute to that. Whoa, now look at the next teacher. That's a lot of kids.
Oh, yeah.
1, 2, 3, 4. I wonder if that teacher is working full-time in reading recovery.
Wow,
not full.
well, she lit.
3/4 time.
So if you go up a little bit to the light blue section about the number of slots that she recorded she has 6 slots.
Yeah. So she's working most of her day in reading recovery.
But now look at a couple of her incompletes. These were the incompletes at the
16. And then 2 12s and 2 16s, and then 1 3, which again, there's a kid who really in other worlds would be recommended. But we've got these. Well, here's also something interesting. Her 1 spring discontinued kid reads at 20 in order to be discontinued. And indeed, her 2 fall kids that discontinued, or I don't know which ones are the fall, but those are
they would be the top.
Oh, the top
4.
6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Yeah.
Kids who at the end of the year, we've got 1 at 24 who was discontinued in the middle of the year, 2 at 18 that were discontinued in the middle of the year. So there's the point being there's pretty high text level requirement at this school, I think, in order to designate a kid discontinued.
All right, man, I feel like we're unearthing some stuff here. This is great. No, I'm like.
Well, that's the point, Jeff.
I know. I'm like excited. I was like, all right, I'm gonna scroll. I think there's one more. Teacher 6 at school 6.
Oh, so that's interesting. I wonder if she was on maternity leave or something, because she's got 6 slots.
Oh, another 6 slot
1,
teacher.
2, 3, 4, 5, 6, but she only taught 6 kids. Oh, and she had no, she did. I don't know.
So these might be
something happened. This maybe. I mean, there's all kinds of things that could happen.
Yeah.
One thing is she could start with 6 kids in the fall, and then once she's done, it may be a small enough school. We're done with reading recovery. Her services get transferred into kindergarten or something else. That's one thing that could happen.
Oh, yeah.
But look, we've got an incomplete kid. Maybe then, okay, take that back. My guess is she wasn't in school in the
fall. Every once in a while, an incomplete kid sneaks through in the fall in the system.
Oh, really?
Oh yeah.
No.
It's like 27 out of 33,000. So.
But at this site, this one incomplete, as we said, one kid is 2 percentage points. So.
Right. But once again, that's why we're hunting. So
yeah, everything else looks pretty ordinary about this kid compared to other things we've looked at.
You know what? You know what I think this is, Laurel. I think this is. I think she did 3 kids in the fall, 3 kids in the spring, because look at the weeks, 20 weeks and 13 weeks.
But that doesn't mean 6 slots then. She misunderstood.
Yeah.
Okay, so here's what's interesting to me. I would love to take these incomplete kids who are at, and we'd have to set a level, but maybe it's 14, maybe it's 12 and above. So that's their text level in the spring. They were considered incomplete at the time. How do they perform on the 3rd grade standardized test? Because we're going to have kids at 12, 14, and 16, and a very few smattering higher than that.
Okay.
How do you perform on your 3rd grade state standardized test?
Okay.
Because if we can show that those kids, even though we don't designate them average by the end of 1st grade, but they're moving along well enough, that would also be another positive outcome of reading recovery. Yes, a kid like this needs further support going into 2nd grade, but if by the end of 3rd grade they can pass their standardized test, I would argue reading recovery has contributed to that success.
All right. So, Laurel, what did we learn?
Well, one thing we learned was if absentee is a problem, it has to be dealt with.
Yeah.
And it either, I mean, I really think they're the first. All right, let's back up. When you're in a selection meeting, often people will say, oh, that kid had a history of absenteeism in kindergarten. They shouldn't participate in reading recovery. And my response is no, they should participate in reading recovery, but immediately we need to, before we ever start, we need to have the parent in, we need to talk about the value of reading recovery and that the only way it's going to work is if the kid comes to school every day. Then we need to monitor their progress carefully and monitor their attendance. If chronic absenteeism continues to be a problem, and usually I say things like if they've missed more than 3 days during the first 10 roaming around the known session days, then we need to talk to that parent again. And now it's this doesn't seem to be going well. We explained that this is a problem, or if it wasn't a problem before, now we're saying it's a problem. And if we don't see an improvement in the attendance, we'll need to take your child out for now, have another child have a chance. And when the attendance is approved, we would consider your child to participate again in reading recovery.
Yeah.
Because especially we're looking at schools here where we believe that we've identified schools that really have high needs. When you've got kids waiting for reading recovery, you cannot use that slot on a kid who doesn't come to school. The corollary to all this is while you're working it out, every time the kid is absent, the reading recovery teacher needs to go find another kid to work with, whether that's a reading recovery child who needs a makeup lesson, who's on their roster already, or if it's one of those kids who's waiting around for reading recovery, just get them and read with them, because any day you read with them is a benefit.
Well, man, I feel like we've done some investigating here.
That's our job.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, Laurel, I'm going to say thank you so much for your time today and clearing your schedule for this was fun. I had a good time. I was like getting into it, and I was ready to start picking up the phone and calling people. What's going on over there? But
well, I always have a fun time talking about data with you, but some people would think we're a little odd for what we call a fun time.
I would prefer the term unique. So.
Okay, yeah. We are definitely unique.
All right. Well, Laura, I'm going to say thank you so much once again for joining me on I Love Data Fridays. And I'm sure we'll think of another topic in the future to bring you back on. So.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on.
Yep. All right.
All right, there you have it, folks. Our How Do You Do Data Today, troubleshooting your data with Laurel Dickey. So just a reminder before we go here, as of the recording of this podcast, you can actually go to the IDEC website and re-download your 1718 and 1819 site and district reports, and they will include those new tables that Laurel and I looked today at the beginning of this video. And we've rerun all your reading recovery and DLL reports. Download them now. Download them at any time. If we happen to miss one of your reports, just contact the help desk and we'll rerun it for you real quick. It only takes about 5 minutes per report to run, and it'll be ready shortly after you contact us. Also, the questions from today's episode can be downloaded from the IDEC website. So now, just a reminder that, the questions that Laurel came up with today are specific to the data that she was looking at. But I think in general, there are some general questions that you can apply to your data as you're looking through your data. So to get to that list of questions, you just pop over to our public website at www.idecweb.us. Click on our publications link. And all you have to do is scroll down to the I Love Data Fridays section. Click on How Do You Do Data? You'll see Laurel's name right there, our March 2020 recording with Laurel Dickey. If you click on that folder, you'll see the episode 45 questions. If we click on those, it'll download a PDF file you can open up, and there's all of our questions, all 12 of our questions from today. All right, well, before we play our outro music, I just want to say thank you for watching I Love Data Fridays, and if you haven't had a chance to subscribe to our channel, go ahead and mash that subscribe button right there so you can get all of the notifications about I Love Data Fridays. And let's cue that music, and I'm going to say thank you once again for joining us for another episode of I Love Data Fridays and How Do You Do Data. So good to have you, and hey, we will talk data to you later.